I'll be honest, this story still makes my stomach turn. Because the worst mistake of my life did not happen in some dramatic hotel room, or during a screaming fight, or after I caught my husband with lipstick on his collar. It happened inside a quiet bank office under bright white lights, while my husband gently squeezed my hand and told me I was the only person who could save our family. And because I loved him, because I trusted him, because I was terrified of watching everything we built fall apart, I signed my name on a loan that would later destroy the life I thought I had. At the time, I had no idea that the money was not going toward our mortgage, or his business, or the emergency he had cried about in our kitchen. It was going to another woman. A woman whose name I had heard before, but only in passing, the way husbands mention people they swear are not important. Her name was Vanessa. And by the time I learned what Mark had really done, my credit was ruined, my savings were gone, and the man I had defended to everyone was standing in front of me like a stranger wearing my husband's face. My name is Claire, and when this started, I was 37 years old, living in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. From the outside, our life looked normal enough to make people comfortable. We had a small brick house with white shutters, 2 used cars in the driveway, a golden retriever named Buddy, and 2 kids who still believed their parents could fix anything. Our daughter, Lily, was 9, sharp and sensitive, the kind of child who noticed tension before adults said a word. Our son, Noah, was 6, sweet and loud, and still convinced his dinosaur blanket protected him from nightmares. I worked part-time at a dental office, mostly handling appointments, insurance forms, and nervous patients who hated cleanings. Mark ran a small home renovation business, and for years, he had been good at making people believe he was always one big contract away from real success. That was his gift, really. He could make struggle sound temporary. He could make debt sound like investment. He could make fear feel like loyalty. For most of our marriage, I thought that meant he was optimistic, hardworking, and brave. Now I understand that optimism can become a mask when someone uses it to hide the truth. The first sign came on a Thursday evening in late October, when Mark came home unusually quiet and sat at the kitchen table without taking off his jacket. I was making spaghetti, Lily was doing homework, and Noah was building some crooked tower of blocks in the living room. Everything felt ordinary, except Mark kept rubbing his thumb across his wedding ring, over and over, like he was trying to polish away a secret. I asked him if something had happened at work, and he gave me this tired smile that made me instantly afraid. He said a client had delayed payment on a major project, and because of that, he was behind on payroll, materials, and the business line of credit. At first, I thought he was telling me about a bad month. Then he said the bank was threatening legal action. Then he said we could lose the house. I remember standing there with the wooden spoon in my hand, staring at him while the sauce bubbled too hard behind me. He lowered his voice because the kids were nearby, and that somehow made everything feel even more serious. He told me he had tried everything already. He said he had called lenders, negotiated with suppliers, begged for extensions, and stayed up 3 nights trying to find another way. Then he looked straight at me and said my credit score was the only thing strong enough to get us through it. I did not answer right away because some quiet part of me already knew this was dangerous. But another part of me, the part that had spent 11 years being a wife, a mother, and the emotional glue of our home, started calculating what would happen if I said no. What if the business collapsed? What if we lost the house? What if the kids had to leave their school? What if Mark never forgave me for refusing when he needed me most? That was the trap, though I did not see it yet. He never said, "Claire, take out this loan," or "everything is your fault." He only made sure I felt it. Over the next 3 days, Mark became softer than he had been in years. He brought me coffee before work, folded laundry without being asked, kissed my forehead while I stood at the sink, and told me he knew he was asking too much. He said he hated putting pressure on me. He said he felt ashamed. He said the loan would only be temporary, maybe 3 or 4 months, just until the delayed payment came through. Every sentence sounded reasonable when I wanted to believe him. By Sunday night, he was sitting beside me in bed with printed documents spread across the comforter, explaining numbers in a calm voice while my heart beat like a warning bell. The loan was for $80,000. When I saw the amount, my mouth went dry. I told him that was not a small bridge loan, that was a hole deep enough to bury us. He nodded, like he understood, then said something I will never forget. Claire, I know this is scary, but this is what married people do. They save each other. And that sentence broke through the last wall I had, because I wanted to be a good wife. I wanted to be the woman who stood beside her husband during hard times. I wanted to believe that love meant stepping into the fire together, even when every instinct in my body was telling me to step back. So on Monday morning, I sat inside that bank office across from a loan officer named Denise, who kept asking if I understood the responsibility I was taking on. Mark sat beside me, calm and grateful, with his hand resting gently on my shoulder. Denise explained the payment schedule, the interest rate, the risk to my credit, and the fact that the loan would be in my name alone. I heard every word, but I kept looking at Mark, waiting for him to tell me we should stop. He did not. Instead, he leaned close and whispered, "We're almost through this, babe." So I signed. My signature looked normal on the page, neat and steady, even though my whole body felt cold. Afterward, Mark hugged me in the parking lot and held me so tightly that I actually cried from relief. I thought I had saved my marriage that morning. I thought I had protected my children from losing their home. I thought the worst part was over. But 3 weeks later, when I opened a bank statement Mark had forgotten on the passenger seat of his truck, I saw a transfer that made no sense. $25,000 had gone out the same day the loan cleared. The recipient name was not a supplier. It was not a contractor. It was not a payroll company. It was Vanessa Monroe. And when I searched her name in Mark's phone that night, I found a message that made my hands go numb. "I told you she would sign. We're safe now." I did not scream when I saw that message. That is the strange part. I always imagined betrayal would make me loud, dramatic, maybe even violent in some way. But in that moment, sitting on the edge of our bed with Mark's phone shaking in my hands, I went completely silent. The house was quiet around me, the kind of quiet that usually felt safe after the kids had gone to sleep. But that night it felt like the whole place was holding its breath with me. I read the message again, slower this time, hoping my brain had twisted the words into something worse than they were. "I told you she would sign. We're safe now." There was no way to soften that sentence. There was no innocent explanation hiding inside it. Mark had not just lied to me about money. He had discussed me with another woman like I was a locked door he had managed to open. My first instinct was to search everything, because once trust cracks, your mind suddenly starts running through every small thing you ignored. The late nights. The phone turned face down. The sudden passwords. The way he had started taking calls in the garage, because he said contractors were too loud to talk around the kids. I opened the thread with Vanessa, and what I saw was worse than anything I had prepared myself for. They were careful, but not careful enough. Most of the messages were short, practical, and cold, which somehow made them feel more intimate than flirting would have. She asked if I had signed yet. He said I was almost there. She asked if the payment would clear before Friday. He told her not to worry, because he knew how to handle me when I got scared. That one line made something inside me collapse. I sat there staring at it, remembering how he had brought me coffee, folded laundry, kissed my forehead, and told me he felt ashamed for asking too much. None of that had been tenderness. It had been strategy. I wanted to wake him up right then and throw the phone at his chest, but the kids were sleeping down the hall, and, some exhausted, protective part of me knew I needed more than rage. So I took pictures of everything. My hands were trembling so badly that the first few photos came out blurry, but I forced myself to breathe, steadied the phone against my knee, and captured every message I could find. Then I checked the call log. Vanessa's number appeared more times than any client, any supplier, any employee, and every call seemed to happen during the parts of the day when Mark told me he was driving between job sites. One call had lasted 48 minutes on the afternoon. He claimed he was at the bank negotiating extensions. Another had lasted over an hour the night. He said he fell asleep early in his truck because he was too stressed to come inside. I felt foolish in a way that almost burned. Not because he had fooled me once, but because I had helped him do it. I had defended his exhaustion. I had explained away his distance. I had told my mother he was under pressure when she quietly asked if everything was okay between us. Even worse, I had signed my name to $80,000 because I believed a crisis he had shaped carefully around my fear. At 2:13 in the morning, I put his phone back exactly where I found it and walked into the bathroom. I locked the door, sat on the closed toilet lid, and cried with a towel pressed against my mouth so nobody would hear me. I cried for the loan. I cried for my children. I cried for the woman I had been that morning at the bank, looking at Mark like he was still my safe place. But when the sun came up, I did something that surprised even me. I did not confront him. I made breakfast. I packed lunches. I kissed Lily and Noah goodbye at the door, then stood in the kitchen while Mark drank coffee like he had not just turned me into collateral for his secret life. He looked tired, but not guilty. That almost scared me more. "Are you okay?" he asked, watching me over the rim of his mug. For a second, I thought he knew. I thought maybe betrayal left some visible bruise on the face, something he could see in my eyes. But then he smiled softly and reached for my hand, and I understood that he was only checking whether the manipulation was still working. "I'm just overwhelmed," I said. He squeezed my fingers and told me everything would be fine soon. That sentence landed in my stomach like a stone. After he left, I called in sick to the dental office and drove straight to the bank. Denise, the loan officer, looked surprised to see me without Mark, but she remained polite and professional as she led me into her office. I asked her where the loan funds had been deposited, and she told me they had gone into the business account I had authorized. Then I asked if she could print the disbursement record. Her expression changed just slightly. Not enough to be dramatic, but enough that I knew she had seen this kind of fear before. She printed what she could legally give me, highlighted the deposit date, and reminded me that because the loan was in my name, I was fully responsible for repayment no matter how the money was used afterward. I nodded like I understood, but inside I was screaming. Before I left, Denise lowered her voice and said, "Claire, document everything. And do not sign anything else until you speak to someone who represents only you. Only you." Those two words stayed with me all day. Because for 11 years, I had thought marriage meant there was no only me anymore. There was us. Our house. Our bills. Our problems. Our future. But sitting in my car outside the bank, with the printed records folded on the passenger seat, I realized Mark had already separated himself from me long before I knew I needed protection. That afternoon, I searched Vanessa Monroe. I told myself I only needed to know who she was, but deep down, I think I was looking for the exact shape of my humiliation. Her social media was not private. She was 32, divorced, polished, and smiling in nearly every photo like life had never once embarrassed her. She posted inspirational quotes, coffee shop selfies, gym mirror pictures, and photos from expensive restaurants I knew Mark and I could never afford. Then I saw something that made my breath catch. A photo from 2 months earlier. Vanessa stood in front of a newly renovated kitchen, her hand resting proudly on a marble countertop, with a caption thanking the most talented man I know for helping her rebuild her life. Mark was not in the picture, but his truck was visible through the window behind her. And in the reflection of the glass cabinet door, faint but clear enough to hurt, I could see him standing there with one arm around her waist. I stared at that reflection until my vision blurred. Then a new thought entered my mind, sharper than the others. If Mark had renovated Vanessa's kitchen, if he had sent her $25,000, if they had planned my signature together, then maybe the loan was not the beginning of their secret. Maybe it was the rescue plan after something between them had already gone terribly wrong. That night, after Mark came home and kissed the kids like nothing had changed, I waited until he went to take a shower. Then I opened the glove compartment of his truck. And under a stack of old gas receipts, I found a folded envelope with Vanessa's name written across the front. Inside were ultrasound pictures. I had been prepared to find another woman's perfume receipt, hotel key card, or maybe some embarrassing love note that would finally make the affair impossible to deny. I was not prepared to sit in my husband's truck, under the pale garage light, holding ultrasound pictures that made my entire marriage feel like it had been quietly replaced behind my back. For a few seconds, I could not even understand what I was seeing. The image was grainy, black and white, soft around the edges, with Vanessa Monroe's name printed at the top and a date from only 6 weeks earlier. 6 weeks. That meant while Mark was crying at our kitchen table about losing the house, while I was lying awake wondering how to save our family, Vanessa was carrying something that tied him to her in a way money never could. I pressed the envelope against my lap and tried to breathe, but the air felt too thick inside the truck. My first thought was not even about Mark. It was about Lily and Noah. I pictured my daughter at the breakfast table, asking why Daddy seemed sad lately, and my son running into Mark's arms every evening like that man was still the center of our world. Then I looked at those ultrasound pictures again, and something inside me went cold. Because this was no longer just an affair. This was a second life. And I had just taken out $80,000 to help him protect it. I heard the shower turn off inside the house, and panic snapped me back into my body. I folded the ultrasound pictures exactly the way I found them, slid them back into the envelope, and placed it under the receipts with shaking fingers. Then I closed the glove compartment and stood in the garage, staring at the door that led into my kitchen. Behind that door, my husband was toweling off, probably humming, probably choosing a clean shirt, probably believing I was still the trusting wife who would never look beneath the surface. For the first time in 11 years, I was afraid to be alone in the same room with him. Not because I thought he would hit me. Mark had never been that kind of man. I was afraid because I finally understood how calm he could stay while destroying me. When I walked back inside, he was standing by the sink in sweatpants, drinking water from a glass like an ordinary husband after an ordinary day. He looked up and smiled. "Everything okay?" he asked. That question nearly broke me. I wanted to say, "Is Vanessa pregnant with your child?" I wanted to ask whether he had practiced crying before he begged me to sign that loan. I wanted to know if he had ever looked at me during those weeks and felt even 1 second of shame. Instead, I opened the refrigerator and pretended to look for leftovers. "I'm fine," I said, and my voice sounded so normal that it scared me. That night, I slept on the edge of the bed, with Mark breathing beside me, while my mind built a timeline from scraps and lies. 2 months earlier, he had started working late again. 7 weeks earlier, he had suddenly become protective of his phone. 6 weeks earlier, Vanessa had an ultrasound. 3 weeks earlier, I signed the loan. And the day the money cleared, $25,000 went straight to her. No woman receives that kind of money by accident. No husband hides ultrasound pictures in his truck because he is just helping a friend. By morning, I knew I needed answers, but I also knew Mark could not be the person I asked. So I called my older sister, Megan, from the parking lot of a grocery store because I was too embarrassed to say the words from inside my own house. Megan lived in Cincinnati, had survived a divorce from a man who gambled away their savings, and had a way of becoming dangerously calm during emergencies. When I told her about the loan, the messages, Vanessa, and the ultrasound pictures, she did not gasp or interrupt. She listened until I ran out of breath. Then she said, "Claire, you need a lawyer before you need a confession." That was the first time anyone said it plainly. Not counselor. Not pastor. Not marriage retreat. Lawyer. The word felt heavy and ugly, but also strangely clean. Megan told me not to move money, not to threaten him, not to warn him, and not to give him the chance to erase anything before I had copies. Then she said something that made my hands tighten around the steering wheel. "If there is a baby and your name is on that debt, he may try to make you the villain before you even understand the story." I knew she was right. Mark had already done it once. He had made me responsible for saving the family while he secretly used me to save himself. That afternoon, I drove to a small family law office near downtown Columbus, the kind of place with beige walls, framed certificates, and a receptionist who looked at crying women without making them feel ashamed. The attorney's name was Rachel Ellis, and she had the calmest voice I had ever heard. I showed her the loan papers, the bank records, and the pictures I had taken from Mark's phone. I did not have the ultrasound photos because I had been too afraid to remove them, but I told her exactly where they were. Rachel listened carefully, asked precise questions, and wrote notes in a yellow legal pad without once looking shocked. That almost comforted me. Then she looked at me and said, "I need you to understand something. Your marriage may be emotional, but this loan is legal." I nodded, even though my chest hurt. She explained that because I had signed willingly, the bank would expect payment from me, regardless of Mark's lies unless we could prove fraud or coercion in a specific legal way. In divorce court, the debt might be divided, but that would not automatically protect my credit from missed payments. Every sentence made the walls feel closer. Then she paused and asked, "Did your husband tell you the loan was for a business emergency?" "Yes," I said. "And the money went to Vanessa?" "Part of it did." Rachel leaned back slightly, and her expression shifted. "Then we follow the money." That sentence became my lifeline. For the next few days, I lived two lives inside one house. By day, I made school lunches, answered calls at the dental office, folded tiny socks, and smiled at Mark across the dinner table while my stomach twisted into knots. By night, I copied documents, photographed receipts, checked dates, saved screenshots, and wrote everything down in a notebook I hid inside an old Christmas decorations box. The more I documented, the more the story changed. The loan had not just saved payroll. It had paid for a luxury apartment deposit, a medical bill, two large credit card payments, and a furniture store purchase in Vanessa's neighborhood. Then, on Friday afternoon, I found the thing that turned fear into fury. An email Mark had accidentally left open on our home computer. It was from Vanessa. The subject line said, "After the divorce." My hands went numb before I even clicked it. Inside, she had written about the apartment, the baby, the money, and how much longer they needed me to stay calm. But the last sentence was the one that made the room tilt around me. "Once Claire thinks the business failed, she'll blame herself for the loan, and you can leave without looking like the bad guy." The email did not make me cry. That scared me more than the crying ever had, because by that point, something inside me had moved past heartbreak and entered a colder place where every detail felt like evidence. I sat at our home computer with the hallway light behind me, reading Vanessa's words over and over, while Mark was upstairs helping Noah find pajamas and pretending to be the father of the year. "Once Claire thinks the business failed, she'll blame herself for the loan, and you can leave without looking like the bad guy." That sentence explained everything. It explained the tears at the kitchen table. It explained the sudden tenderness, the folded laundry, the coffee, the gentle hand on my shoulder inside the bank office. It explained why Mark had never looked panicked after I signed, even though we were supposedly drowning. He was not afraid of the business failing. He was building a story where I would look responsible for the collapse. I clicked deeper into the email thread before my courage disappeared, and that was when I saw an attachment Vanessa had sent 2 days before I signed the loan. The file name was simple: Transition Plan. My throat tightened as I opened it, because some part of me already knew that whatever was inside would hurt worse than the messages. It was a spreadsheet. Not a love letter. Not a romantic plan. A spreadsheet. There were columns for bills, dates, transfers, apartment costs, medical expenses, attorney consultation fees, and something labeled Claire Delay period. I stared at those words until they stopped looking like English. Claire Delay period. That was what they called my marriage. That was what they called the weeks where I cooked dinner, kissed my children goodnight, and tried to hold my husband together while he quietly planned how long he could keep using me. The spreadsheet showed the $80,000 loan divided into stages. $25,000 to Vanessa, $12,000 toward an apartment lease, $8,000 toward medical expenses, another $10,000 set aside for legal and moving. Then there was a line for Mark's business debts, but the amount beside it was so small I almost laughed. $4,000. The emergency that had supposedly threatened our home, our children, and our entire future was not $80,000. It was $4,000. I leaned back from the screen, pressed both hands over my mouth, and whispered the only words that made sense. This is just insane. Not dramatic insane. Not heartbreak insane. Actual, organized, planned, written down madness. They had not simply made a selfish mistake in the middle of an affair. They had made me finance the exit, For several minutes, I could hear my own heartbeat louder than the television downstairs. Then I remembered Megan's warning. He may try to make you the villain before you understand the story. So I photographed the screen, saved the attachment to a flash drive, emailed a copy to a new account Mark did not know existed, and closed everything exactly the way I found it. By the time Mark came downstairs, I was standing at the sink rinsing a glass, pretending my whole world had not just shifted beneath my feet. He walked up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. A month earlier, that would have comforted me. That night, his touch felt like a locked door. "You've been quiet lately," he murmured. I could feel his breath against my neck, warm and familiar, and I hated that my body still recognized him as safe before my mind corrected it. "I'm tired," I said. He kissed the side of my head. "Everything is going to get better soon." I almost turned around and asked if Vanessa had helped him practice that line. Instead, I nodded and dried my hands. The next morning, I brought everything to Rachel Ellis. She did not interrupt while I explained the spreadsheet, the apartment, the baby, the Claire delay period, and the $4,000 business debt buried under all the lies. But when she reached that part, her pen stopped moving. "That changes things," she said. It was the first time I heard any real edge in her voice. Rachel explained that proving deception would still be difficult, but the spreadsheet showed intent in a way random transfers did not. It suggested Mark had misrepresented the purpose of the loan, and it also showed that Vanessa knew I was being manipulated before I signed. Then Rachel asked the question I had been avoiding. "Do you think he would empty joint accounts if he knew you were preparing to leave?" I did not answer immediately, because the honest answer was worse than yes. The honest answer was that I no longer knew where Mark's limits were. That afternoon, Rachel helped me make a quiet plan. I opened a separate checking account at a different bank, redirected my paycheck, requested copies of tax returns, and froze one credit card Mark had access to. I also called the credit bureaus, because Rachel said people who manipulate one financial document often manipulate another. I felt embarrassed making those calls, like I was admitting I had failed as an adult. But the woman on the phone was kind. She placed a fraud alert on my credit file and told me to watch for any new inquiries. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in my car with my forehead against the steering wheel. For the first time, I understood something I should have understood earlier. Love does not protect you from paperwork. Trust does not protect your credit. And being a good wife does not stop someone from using your name when they have already decided you are disposable. That evening, Mark came home cheerful. Too cheerful. He brought takeout from the kids' favorite pizza place, tossed his keys on the counter, and announced that he had spoken with a guy about a new contract that could turn everything around. Lily smiled because she wanted to believe him. Noah cheered because pizza was pizza. I watched Mark perform hope for our children, and for one awful second, I wondered how many times he had performed it for me. After dinner, while the kids were upstairs brushing their teeth, Mark leaned against the counter and studied my face. "You know I love you, right?" he said. The question landed wrong. Not tender. Not guilty. Testing. I looked at him and said, "Of course." He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Then his phone buzzed on the counter between us. He glanced down too quickly, and I saw Vanessa's name appear before he flipped the screen over. He laughed softly, like nothing mattered. "Supplier," he said. I nodded, but something about that lie felt different. Later that night, after Mark fell asleep, I checked the credit monitoring email that had arrived while I was cleaning the kitchen. At first, I thought it was only a confirmation of the fraud alert. Then I opened it. Someone had applied for another personal loan using my social security number that same afternoon. The application had been declined, but the note underneath made my blood turn cold. The listed co-applicant was Vanessa Monroe. The second loan application changed the way I looked at my husband. Before that, I still wanted to believe there was some human line inside Mark, some hidden place where shame would stop him before he dragged me any deeper into his mess. But when I saw Vanessa's name listed beside mine, attached to my social security number, like she had a right to stand there, something in me finally understood the truth. They were not just leaving me behind. They were trying to use my identity as a bridge to their new life. I sat at the kitchen table after midnight, staring at the credit alert on my laptop while the dishwasher hummed beside me and my children slept upstairs, completely unaware that their mother's name had almost become another piece of stolen property. The application had been declined because of the fraud alert I placed earlier that day. That one small step had saved me from another disaster. And for the first time since everything started, I felt something stronger than panic. I felt proof that protecting myself was not betrayal. It was survival. The next morning, I called Rachel before I even brushed my hair, and my voice sounded strangely calm as I read the alert to her word for word. She told me not to confront Mark yet, because the attempt to use my information could become important, especially if we connected it to the earlier loan and the spreadsheet. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten. Claire, you need to assume they know you are becoming harder to control. I looked across the kitchen at Mark's coffee mug in the sink, the one that said "World's Best Dad," and for a second, I felt like I was standing inside somebody else's nightmare. Rachel told me to change passwords, save copies of everything, keep documents outside the house, and prepare for the possibility that Mark might suddenly become either very loving or very cruel. She said people like him often switched tactics when quiet pressure stopped working. By noon, I had changed every password I could think of. Email, banking, credit cards, cloud storage, the kids' school portal, even the grocery rewards account, because by then I trusted nothing connected to our shared life. I put our birth certificates, social security cards, tax returns, and the kids' medical records in a folder, then drove them to Megan's friend who lived across town and had agreed to hold them for me. I remember walking back to my car with empty hands and feeling lighter, but also terribly sad. Because nobody tells you how painful it is to protect yourself from someone you still remember loving. That evening, Mark came home with flowers. Not grocery store flowers. Expensive ones. White roses wrapped in brown paper, tied with twine, the kind he used to buy on anniversaries before life became bills, homework, and missed conversations. He set them on the counter and smiled like he was stepping into a scene he had rehearsed. I know I've been distant, he said, soft enough that I almost recognized the man I married. I kept my hands around a dish towel so he would not see them shake. He told me the stress had made him selfish, that he had been scared, that he wanted to take me somewhere for the weekend when things settled down. Every word sounded carefully chosen. Every apology arrived without one actual confession. I looked at those flowers and wondered if Vanessa knew he had bought them. Maybe she had suggested it. Maybe they had discussed how to calm me again. That thought made my skin crawl. Mark stepped closer and touched my arm. Claire, I need to know you still believe in us. There it was. Not love. Not honesty. A loyalty test. I forced myself to look at him, because running too soon would only warn him that I knew more than I was saying. I want to, I said. His face relaxed so quickly that I knew I had given him exactly what he needed. Later, after the kids were asleep, he asked if I could call the bank with him the next day to discuss restructuring the loan. He said it would lower the monthly payment and buy us some breathing room. The old Claire would have listened. The old Claire would have grabbed a notebook, asked questions, and tried to help. But the woman sitting across from him now heard the hidden door inside that sentence. Another document. Another signature. Another trap. I told him I needed to think because the first loan still made me anxious. For the first time, his expression changed before he could hide it. It was quick, just a flash of irritation beneath the concern, but it was enough. Claire, we're married, he said, his voice still calm but tighter now. You can't suddenly act like I'm some stranger trying to hurt you. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because he had described exactly what he had become. I'm not saying that, I answered carefully. But Mark was already watching me differently. His eyes moved across my face like he was searching for a crack, something that would tell him how much I knew. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket. He did not take it out. He just stood there, jaw tight, waiting for the sound to stop. That was when I realized Vanessa was probably pressuring him too. The next day, Rachel filed the first emergency paperwork. She also advised me to make a police report about the attempted loan application, even though I knew it would make everything feel painfully real. At the police station, I sat across from an officer named Daniels and explained that someone had used my social security number with another woman as co-applicant. He listened, typed slowly, and asked whether I suspected my husband. My mouth opened, but for a moment, no sound came out. Saying it out loud felt like crossing a bridge I could never uncross. Yes, I finally said. I believe my husband may be involved. The officer nodded, printed a report number, and told me to keep watching my credit. It was ordinary paperwork to him. To me, it felt like the official death certificate of my marriage. That night, Mark found the receipt from the police station in my coat pocket. I had been careful with everything else, but I forgot that one small folded piece of paper, and that mistake nearly cost me the only advantage I had. He was waiting in the kitchen when I came downstairs after putting Noah to bed. The receipt lay flat on the counter beneath his hand. His face was pale. His voice was quiet. Too quiet. Why were you at the police station, Claire? For a second, all the air left the room. I looked at him, then at the receipt, then back at the man who had begged me to save our family while planning to abandon it. And before I could answer, headlights swept across the front windows. A car had pulled into our driveway. Mark looked toward the door. His phone lit up on the counter. Vanessa was calling. The moment Vanessa's name lit up on Mark's phone, I understood that my house was no longer my house. It was a stage. The flowers on the counter, the soft apologies, the worried husband act, the careful voice asking why I had gone to the police station, all of it had been part of a performance that was finally falling apart in front of me. And now Vanessa was outside. Not a message. Not a hidden photo. Not a name on a bank transfer. She was sitting in a car in my driveway, calling my husband, while my children slept upstairs and the police receipt lay between us like a match waiting to catch fire. Mark did not answer the phone. He stared at the screen until it stopped ringing, then looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. It was not guilt. It was calculation. Claire, he said slowly, I need you to stay calm. That sentence almost made me smile, because men like Mark always want calm after they create chaos. I looked toward the front window, where the headlights washed across our living room wall, bright enough to make the family photos look strange and flat. Is that Vanessa? I asked. His jaw tightened, and for 1 second he looked like he might lie again, but even he must have known the lie had run out of space. She's upset, he said. I stared at him, waiting for the rest. But that was it. Vanessa was upset. Not his wife, who had signed an $80,000 loan based on a fake emergency. Not his children, whose home had been turned into collateral for his affair. Not the woman standing in front of him with proof, fear, and a police report in her coat pocket. Vanessa was upset. Then the doorbell rang. The sound cut through the house so sharply that I flinched, and upstairs I heard Noah shift in his bed. Mark moved toward the hallway, but I stepped in front of him before I had time to think. You are not bringing her into this house, I said. My voice was quiet, but something in it made him stop. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, Mark looked genuinely unsure of me. That should have felt powerful. Instead, it felt heartbreaking. Because I realized how long I had mistaken peacekeeping for kindness, and how often I had lowered my voice just to keep his world comfortable. The doorbell rang again, longer this time. Then my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I did not answer. A second later, a text appeared. Tell him to stop lying to both of us. I looked down at the message, and everything inside me slowed. Both of us. Those words cracked open a possibility I had not wanted to consider. Vanessa was not just calling because she was bold. She was calling because Mark had been lying to her too. I held up the phone so Mark could see the text. His face changed so fast that I knew I had found a nerve. Claire, don't engage with her, he said, reaching for the phone. I pulled it back. You don't get to manage both conversations anymore. His eyes flashed, and for the first time, his calm voice disappeared. You have no idea what she's capable of. The words landed hard. Not because they scared me of Vanessa. Because they told me Mark was afraid of what she might say. I walked to the front door and opened it with the chain still locked. Vanessa stood on the porch in a beige coat, one hand pressed to her stomach, her face pale beneath perfect makeup that had started to smudge around her eyes. She was beautiful, but not in the untouchable way I had imagined. She looked tired, angry, cornered, and painfully human. Her eyes moved past me toward Mark, then back to my face. "So you know," she said. I did not answer right away, because there are moments in life when a stranger suddenly becomes the mirror you hate looking into. Vanessa had helped destroy my marriage, but standing there on my porch, she also looked like a woman who had been promised something that was now collapsing around her. "I know enough," I said. She laughed once, sharp and bitter. "Then you know he told me the loan was already approved through the business, and that you were only signing paperwork because married couples had to." My stomach tightened. Mark stepped closer behind me. "Vanessa, leave," he said. She ignored him. "He told me you two were separated in everything but name," she continued, her voice trembling now. "He said you knew the marriage was over, but you were dragging it out because of the kids." I looked over my shoulder at Mark. He shook his head, already preparing another version of the truth. "She's desperate," he said. "She's trying to protect herself." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears, but her voice hardened. "No, Mark. I'm trying to stop being the only one you make look crazy." That sentence hit me harder than I expected, because that was exactly what he had done to me. He had placed every woman in his life inside a different story, then stood in the middle collecting loyalty from all sides. Vanessa reached into her purse and pulled out a folded stack of papers. "I have messages," she said. "Emails too. He promised me he would repay you before he left. He said the business had assets. He said you would never be hurt." I wanted to hate her cleanly. I wanted her to be a monster because monsters are easier than complicated people who make cruel choices while also being lied to. But when she handed the papers through the gap in the door, her hand was shaking. Mark grabbed my shoulder. "Do not take those," he snapped. The sound of his voice woke something ancient in me. I turned slowly, and for once, I did not shrink from the anger in his face. "Take your hand off me," I said. He froze. Maybe because the children were upstairs. Maybe because Vanessa was watching. Or maybe because he finally understood that the woman he had counted on was gone. I took the papers. Vanessa backed away, breathing hard, and said, "He applied for that second loan because he told me you agreed to help with the apartment before the baby came." I looked at Mark. The kitchen light behind him made his face look hollow. For the first time, he had no sentence ready. No gentle explanation. No wounded husband act. Just silence. Then upstairs, Lily's small voice came from the hallway. "Mom?" I turned and saw my daughter standing at the top of the stairs, holding the railing, her eyes wide with fear. That was the moment everything became simple. Not easy. Simple. I could not control what Mark had done. I could not erase the loan, the affair, the baby, or the humiliation. But I could decide what my children watched me accept. I closed the door on Vanessa, locked it, and walked upstairs to Lily before Mark could say another word. I held my daughter's shaking shoulders and told her we were safe, even though I was not sure how true that was yet. Then I looked down at Mark from the stairs and said the sentence I should have said the day he first asked me to sign. "You need to leave tonight." His face went white. And behind me, my phone buzzed again. This time, the message was from Rachel. "Do not let him take the laptop." The message from Rachel made my whole body go still. "Do not let him take the laptop." I stood halfway up the stairs with Lily pressed against my side, Noah crying softly from his bedroom doorway, and Mark standing below us like a man whose mask had finally cracked at the edges. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then Mark's eyes shifted toward the small office beside the kitchen. That was all the confirmation I needed. The laptop mattered. Not because it was expensive, and not because he suddenly needed to check work emails at midnight, but because the laptop held the spreadsheet, the messages, the documents, and probably things I had not even found yet. "Claire," he said, using that careful voice again, "you're scaring the kids." I almost believed him for half a second, because guilt was still the easiest leash he had on me. But then Lily tightened her fingers around my sweatshirt, and I realized he was doing it again. He was taking the damage he caused and trying to hand it back to me. "No," I said, keeping my voice steady for the children. "You scared them when you brought this to our door." Mark looked at Lily, then at Noah, and I saw him trying to become their father again in real time. His face softened. His shoulders lowered. He looked wounded, exhausted, misunderstood. "Kids, Daddy just needs to get some work things, okay?" he said. Lily did not answer. She just leaned closer into me, and that small movement broke my heart more than any confession could have. I told both children to go into my bedroom and close the door. Noah started crying harder, asking if Daddy was leaving forever, and I wanted to collapse right there on the stairs. Instead, I walked him gently into my room, wrapped the dinosaur blanket around his shoulders, and told him grown-up problems were not his fault. When I came back down, Mark was already near the office. I moved faster than I thought I could. "Do not touch that laptop," I said. He turned slowly, and this time there was no softness left. "You have no idea what you're doing," he said. That sentence would have scared me once. That night, it clarified everything. "I know exactly what I'm doing," I answered. "I'm protecting myself." He gave a bitter laugh, low and ugly. "From me?" "Yes," I said. The word hung between us like a broken window. For 11 years, I had avoided saying things that could not be taken back, but that one felt clean. Mark stared at me, and I could see the moment he understood that the old version of me was not coming back to negotiate. Then he grabbed his keys from the counter. "You'll regret this," he said. Maybe he meant the marriage. Maybe he meant the loan. Maybe he meant the fact that I had finally stopped being useful. But before he walked out, he looked toward the office one more time, and I knew Rachel had been right. After the door slammed, I locked it, checked the back door, then carried the laptop upstairs like it was evidence in a murder case. My hands shook as I placed it under my side of the bed. For the rest of the night, I sat on the floor between my sleeping children and the hallway, listening for every sound outside. At 4:40 in the morning, Mark texted me, "You're making this worse." Then another, "Vanessa is unstable. You don't know what she told you." Then a third, "Think about the kids before you destroy me." That one made me close my eyes, because there it was again. Not think about the kids before I lied. Not think about the kids before I used your credit. Not think about the kids before I planned a second life with another woman. Think about the kids before you hold me accountable. By sunrise, I felt older than 37. Rachel called at 7 and told me to bring the laptop, Vanessa's papers, and the children to her office if I felt unsafe staying home. Megan was already driving from Cincinnati before I even asked. When she arrived, she hugged me in the driveway so tightly that I finally cried without trying to hide it. Not the quiet bathroom kind of crying. The kind that bends your whole body because the truth has nowhere else to go. She took the kids to school so their morning would feel almost normal, and I drove to Rachel's office with the laptop on the passenger seat and Vanessa's papers inside a grocery tote. Rachel's assistant made copies of everything: the spreadsheet, the email thread, the loan documents, the attempted loan alert, the papers Vanessa had handed me through the door. Then Rachel read one of Vanessa's printed messages and went very quiet. It was from Mark, dated 2 days before the bank appointment. "Claire will sign if I make it about the house. She can't stand the thought of failing the kids." I felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my lungs. Because he knew exactly where to press. He knew my softest place. And he used it like a button. Rachel told me we had enough to request temporary orders, protect access to the home, address financial misconduct in the divorce process, and document the identity theft attempt separately. The words sounded legal and distant, but underneath them, I heard something else. A door opening. Not wide, not easily, but enough for air. That afternoon, with Megan beside me, I opened a new life in pieces. A separate phone plan, a locked mailbox, a consultation with a credit counselor, a list of every bill in my name, a calendar with every payment deadline written in red. It was humiliating and empowering at the same time. I hated that I had to learn how to survive my own marriage, but I was also proud of every step I took without asking Mark for permission. 3 days later, he was served. I was at work when it happened, and I knew because he called me 12 times in 20 minutes. I did not answer. Then he left a voicemail. His voice was not angry anymore. It was broken. He said he loved me. He said Vanessa meant nothing. He said the baby might not even be his. He said he had panicked, made mistakes, lost himself, and needed his wife to help him come back from this. For the first time, his tears did not move me the way they used to, because I finally understood that regret is not the same as responsibility. That evening, Vanessa texted me again. "He's telling me you forged the documents." I stared at the message for a long time. Then another came through. "And he says you threatened to take everything unless I disappear." I sat down slowly at the kitchen table, the same table where Mark had first told me we might lose the house. Megan looked at my face and asked what happened. I handed her the phone. She read the messages, then whispered, "He's building a new story." And before I could answer, an email notification appeared from an address I did not recognize. The subject line made my stomach drop. Evidence against Claire Bennett. The email looked harmless for exactly 2 seconds. Then I opened it, and my hands went cold before I even reached the second line. Someone had attached screenshots of text messages, banknotes, and a typed statement claiming I had known about the loan from the beginning, approved every transfer, and later threatened Mark when he refused to give me full control of the business. The statement said I was unstable. It said I was angry about the pregnancy. It said I had created a false police report to punish him. And at the bottom, under a sentence that made my vision blur, Mark had written that he feared I might financially destroy the family out of revenge. For a moment, I could not breathe. Not because I believed any of it would hold up perfectly, but because I finally saw how far he was willing to go. Megan stood beside me, reading over my shoulder, her face changing from shock to something colder. "Do not answer him," she said. I did not. I forwarded everything to Rachel, then sat at the kitchen table with my phone face down, because I was afraid one more message might make me break. Rachel called 20 minutes later, and her voice was calm, but firm. She told me the email was exactly why we had documented everything early. She told me liars often became more aggressive once proof started closing in. Then she said something I held onto for months. "Claire, the truth does not have to be loud. It just has to be organized." So that became my job. Not revenge. Not screaming. Not begging Mark to admit what he had done. Organization. Rachel compared timestamps, bank records, credit alerts, and the messages Vanessa had brought to my door. The fake screenshots Mark sent did not match the real message history. The dates were wrong. The formatting was wrong. One screenshot showed a conversation supposedly from my phone, but the phone carrier records proved no such messages had ever been sent. And the strongest part came from Vanessa, of all people. 2 days after the email, she agreed to meet Rachel with her own attorney present. I did not attend because I was not ready to sit across from the woman who had stood inside the ruins of my marriage. But Rachel told me later that Vanessa brought everything. Emails, texts, voice memos, screenshots. Even a note Mark had written about the loan, where he called me the easiest path because my credit was clean and I cared too much about keeping the house. That line hurt in a different way. Not sharp. Deep. Because it made me realize he had not misunderstood my love. He had counted on it. The divorce did not happen cleanly, because stories like mine rarely end with one dramatic courtroom scene and instant justice. There were hearings, delays, bills, school meetings, credit calls, and nights when I cried in the shower because I was too tired to cry anywhere else. The bank still expected payment because my name was on the loan. That part was brutal. Even with evidence, even with lawyers, even with temporary orders, the legal system did not magically erase my signature from a contract I had signed while trusting the wrong person. But Rachel fought hard. Mark was ordered to contribute to the debt during the divorce proceedings. Later, in the settlement, the loan became part of the financial misconduct claim, and he was required to assume responsibility for a large portion of it. It was not perfect. Nothing about it felt fair enough. But it was a path out. I sold the house the following spring. That was one of the hardest decisions I ever made, because every room held 2 versions of my life. In the kitchen, I remembered making spaghetti while Mark told me we could lose everything. In the hallway, I remembered Lily standing at the top of the stairs, learning too young that adults can lie. In the bedroom, I remembered holding his phone and realizing my marriage had a secret basement. But when the sale closed, I did not feel defeated. I felt empty first, then free. The kids and I moved into a smaller rental near their school, with beige carpet, thin walls, and a tiny patio where Noah insisted we put 2 plastic chairs and a tomato plant. It was not the life I had pictured. But nobody was lying to me there. Nobody was asking me to sign papers at midnight. Nobody was turning my fear into a plan. Mark's relationship with Vanessa collapsed before the divorce was final. I do not know every detail, and honestly, I stopped wanting to know. She had the baby months later, and the paternity situation became another storm I refused to stand inside. That was his life to answer for, not mine. The last time I saw Mark outside court, he looked smaller than I remembered. He tried to apologize in the parking lot, standing near his truck with tired eyes and no wedding ring. He said he had lost everything. He said he never meant to hurt me that badly. He said he wished we could go back. I looked at him for a long moment, and I realized I was not waiting for the perfect apology anymore. Because even if he found the right words, they would not return my credit score, my trust, my house, or the woman I was before that bank office. So I simply said, "You did not lose everything. You spent it." Then I got in my car and drove away. 2 years later, my life is quieter. Not easy. Quieter. I still pay close attention to every statement, every form, every account in my name. My credit is recovering slowly. Lily is in middle school now, and she still watches people carefully, but she laughs more than she used to. Noah barely remembers the worst night, though sometimes he asks why Dad lives somewhere else, and I answer gently without giving him a burden that belongs to adults. As for me, I learned that love should never require you to abandon your own protection. A real partner does not need your panic to get your loyalty. A real marriage does not survive because one person signs away their safety while the other hides the truth. And sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is not saving the family at any cost. Sometimes it is finally admitting the cost is too high. I still think about that morning at the bank. The bright lights. The blue pen. Mark's hand on my shoulder. Denise asking if I understood what I was taking on. Back then, I thought she meant the loan. Now I know it was bigger than that. I was taking on the consequences of trusting someone more than I trusted my own fear. And the strange thing is, I do not hate the woman who signed that paper. I feel sorry for her. She was tired, scared, loyal, and trying so hard to keep her family whole. But I am not her anymore. Now, when my stomach tightens, I listen. When something feels wrong, I check. And when someone tells me love means proving myself with my signature, my silence, or my sacrifice, I remember the woman named Vanessa. I remember the spreadsheet. I remember the words Claire Delay period. And I walk away before the pen ever touches the page.